Hello and welcome. I'm Tom Burges-Watson.
And I'm Leanne Gerrans, and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya headquarters.
Today, Donald Trump will become the 47th President of the United States of America.
Over the next couple of hours, we'll bring you all the live coverage from Washington, from the swearing-in ceremony to the first presidential speech, with all the analysis from commentators and former colleagues of Donald Trump.
Okay, so lots coming up in the next couple of hours. And as Donald Trump prepares to return to the White House for the second time, many will be wondering what to expect from Trump 2.0.
Yes, indeed, Tom. From the promises he made over the course of his election campaign to the people who will serve by his side, the whole world prepares to witness history as he is sworn into the Oval Office in just a matter of minutes, believe it or not.
Indeed, very soon. But we're going to begin with his former White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, who was part of the original Trump administration back in 2017. Sean, great to have you with us again here on Al Arabiya News. It is, of course, Inauguration Day. We heard Donald Trump yesterday promising a lot of fun watching television. I'm just wondering what you think we can expect to happen today.
Well, I think there's two parts to today. There's the pomp and circumstance and tradition that we'll see at noon today. The transfer of power from the Biden administration to the second Trump administration. Trump will take the oath of office. He'll be sworn in. They'll have a lunch. They'll do the parade. Obviously, a lot of it's moving inside because of the frigid temperatures here in the Washington, D.C. area. And then you're going to get to the action. And President Trump, I was with him at his rally yesterday, told everybody there that over 200 executive orders and actions will be signed today. And just to put that in context, I think 22 is the record on day one. So this will far eclipse that. And it's everything from energy to action on the border. There's some social and cultural things that he's mentioned. But this is going to be a very consequential and historic day.
Sean, twice impeached, the first individual with a criminal conviction to be inaugurated. This isn't just a comeback, it's a massive rebuke to the political establishment. How do you feel to see Trump's return? And what really can we expect from a second Trump presidency? You did mention the executive orders there, something a lot of people have been discussing ahead of today.
So, you know, it's a really good question that you're asking, because I've thought about this just because, A, I'm a political guy, but also because I've kind of been through it. And I think we're about to embark on probably the 4 most historic years in any modern presidency. And here's why. When most presidents serve consecutive terms, they're back to back. In fact, this will be only the second time in American history that a president has served 2 terms, but not back to back. In the 4 years that Donald Trump was out of office, not just him, the person, but his entire team was planning a possible return. What people would they want? What policies would they need? And what processes would help get those things done? So when we talk about hitting the ground running today, it's not just a bunch of paperwork that's being pushed across the desk. It's 4 years of policies that have been thought through to get the country back on track, whether that's energy independence, closing our border, getting rid of some regulations that are impeding our ability to prosper, making us more safe, restoring some sanity in the culture wars that have been going on the last 4 years, and getting rid of the woke ideology throughout our government that President Biden ushered in. But I don't think that you can really overstate how consequential being out of office for 4 years will have been for the next 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, talk about hitting the ground running. I mean, as you say, extremely busy even before this administration takes office. And I see you being busy predicting some of these executive orders. I just want to ask you to cast your mind back, though, to
Can I just, real quick, I apologize, but I just want to underscore something. When we came into office 8 years ago, and they're going through the events of today. In many cases, I was walking up to key members of the senior staff, cabinet members, introducing myself for the first time, right? We hadn't known each other. We got to work with each other. The team that's coming in now is familiar with each other. They know Donald Trump. When you say the words hitting the ground running, you couldn't be more accurate. These guys are ready to go today. My successor coming into the office today, Caroline Levitt's she worked in the last Trump administration, the last Trump White House. She knows President Trump. So she hits the ground running in a way that I just couldn't, right? Because she knows the building. She's worked there before. She worked for Kayleigh McEnany. And then she's been working hand in glove with President Trump. So in many cases, the people coming into the White House have a much, much stronger relationship with each other and the president that's going to benefit them day one.
Exactly, and he's obviously been president before himself, so he knows a lot more about what the job entails than he did. He's got more contacts and everything else. But I just want to ask you to cast your mind back again to those early days of the Trump presidency, back 8 years ago, as you say. What was it like working with Donald Trump?
It was unbelievable. I mean, I've been in and out of politics and government and the military for years. Donald Trump empowered people to get things done. And that's a really unique thing to have, not just a boss, but the head of the government saying, if you can get this done and you can get it done better or more efficiently, then go execute it. He's not worried about titles and roles. He's, and some people, and it took a while to get used to. It's not normal, right? It's not traditional. But Trump's not worried about the norms, the traditions, what role somebody's supposed to have versus somebody else. He wants people around him that are getting things done and making positive change for the country. And I think that took a while to get used to, frankly. Like he's a guy that's always on the move. He's up early. He stays up late, and there's no secret about that when you look at his social media posts. And so he keeps you busy. You're always on the edge of your seat. And I think, for some people that can be daunting. It definitely takes a little bit of getting used to. But it's a very cool thing to be part of an administration and a team where that, you've got some leadership that's encouraging you to lean forward to get things done.
Sean, you talked there about there being leadership, getting things done. But in his farewell address to the nation, President Biden, he issued a really stark warning about an oligarchy he says is taking shape in America. Should the country actually be concerned about the wealthy elite that include the likes of Elon Musk having so much leverage in Trump's government that is to come?
I'm glad you cued in on that line that President Biden said the other night, because it was funny when Mark Zuckerberg was spending hundreds of millions of what they called Zuck bucks around the country to influence the election. President Biden didn't have that same concern. When Jeff Bezos was when all these guys who were on President Biden's side were doing his bidding. I mean, you've heard Mark Zuckerberg come out and talk openly that President Biden and his staff would call and yell at them and tell them to take down certain posts that they didn't like. When that was going on, President Biden certainly didn't seem to have the same concerns. It's interesting because we walked into office 8 years ago with a massive resistance from big tech, from corporate America, the media. And for 4 years of Joe Biden, we heard none of the concerns that he expressed the other night in that speech. It was only when he and his team lost that suddenly they had those concerns, and you've got to wonder why. And I just overall actually found that speech as an American very disappointing. Biden's been in office for 52 years, and I would think that he would want to go out on a higher note, less dark. And while I don't agree with most of his policies, I think I would have advised him, go through what you think you've accomplished in those 5 decades in public office, and let people and start to define your legacy instead of pitching this darkness theme that I don't think most people bought.
Yeah, I just was looking at your Twitter feed before we went on air, Sean, and you've been commenting on, some of the articles doing the rounds about retribution during the next Trump presidency. I think it was an article in the New York Times you pointed to. We've seen a couple of new pardons issued by the Biden administration. I'm just wondering, how much retribution do you expect us to see in this next administration?
Yeah, well, first of all, let's just make sure everyone understands that President Biden, on the way out, preemptively pardoned people like Anthony Fauci and General Milley and people on the January 6th committee, which makes you have to wonder, what did he think they did wrong? So I'll leave that to him to potentially explain. But I think what I would always tell people in the media who get all hyperventilated when it comes to Donald Trump is look at the last 4 years of Donald Trump, right? He had made a bunch of political statements about Hillary Clinton. He didn't do any. He let her live her life. I think that people get all excited and realize, just look at the first 4 years of the Trump administration, and you can take from that what you will.
All right, well, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time, but really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Sean Spicer, former White House press secretary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, I just actually wanted to have a chat with you off the back of that interview that we both did together. And it's really about the weather. Things have changed a lot in DC today from what we were expecting. Absolutely frigid temperatures. What do you think of it being held inside?
Well, I think probably from a security point of view, it's actually easier if it's held inside, but it has meant a vastly reduced crowd size. As you can imagine, they haven't got the National Mall in front, which can accommodate tens of thousands of people. So those people are going to have to watch it from a stadium. But I'm being told that, in fact, it was very cold, and it has been very unseasonably cold in DC the last couple of weeks. There's been snow, and if you remember, on the 6th of January of this year, when they confirmed the Trump presidency, it was so cold they thought some of the senators and some of the congressmen and women wouldn't be able to make it there on time because of the frigid temperatures. But I'm being told it's about as cold today as it was on Inauguration Day for President Barack Obama back in 2009. So it's, some saying perhaps they could have just about managed to do it outside, but I expect there are a lot of people who are glad it's being done indoors, including perhaps some journalists who might be standing outside with a microphone shivering.
Well, Tom, my first thought was really a lot of the world's journalists there, all eyes, all the media's there, absolutely freezing temperatures, as you said. But we just got some live pictures up right now of what's happening inside. We can see, there we are, there's Donald Trump. He's walking into the rotunda right now. And of course, Trump loves a stage, doesn't he? We can hear the music, giving his wife Melania a kiss on the cheek. He's got a big smile on his face, and he's even shaking hands. This really is Donald Trump's moment. There he is, shaking hands with Joe Biden. Really, Tom, after 4 years, I feel like, can we believe what's happening right now? J.D. Vance there too.
Indeed, and it's been a very smooth transition. We understand the Trumps and the Bidens have just had a very cordial tea or coffee, we're not quite sure which, at the White House, and a smooth transition of power. Very different set of scenes and dynamics to 4 years ago, when in fact Donald Trump didn't attend President Biden's inauguration. He is, of course, still President Biden, but he remains president for life. In fact, so the United States, you keep the title of president all the way till the end of your life. But indeed, this is looking like a smooth transition of power. That's how it's been described by a lot of insiders. So all of this happening in what they call the symbolic physical heart of the Capitol, the Rotunda Dome, which is above them. That's what's happening now. Let's listen in a bit.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Okay, so we're looking now at the about to be sworn in for the second time President Donald Trump, with his choice of vice president sitting behind him, J.D. Vance. And here begins the inauguration ceremony, as we've been saying, under this enormous dome, the 60-meter tall dome, which rises above the Capitol building, perhaps the most iconic and recognizable seat of political power in the United States. So this is all happening now. Let's listen in.
at the heart of our democracy. For the past year, I've chaired the Inaugural Ceremony Committee, which includes the leadership of Congress from both parties. We thank the committee and Capitol staff and law enforcement who worked so hard over the last year, and especially the last 3 days. You've done a beautiful job, and you have shown grace under pressure. Our theme this year is our enduring democracy. The presence of so many presidents and vice presidents here today is truly a testament to that endurance. We welcome President Biden and Dr. Biden. We welcome Vice President Harris and Doug Emhoff, President Obama, President Clinton and Secretary Clinton, President Bush and Laura Bush, Vice President Pence, Vice President Quayle and Marilyn Quayle. The justices of the United States Supreme Court are with us, all 9 of them I counted, and of course the Trump and Vance families. This ceremony marks what will soon be 250 years of our democracy. It is the moment when leaders, elevated by the will of the people, promise to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, the guardians of our country. Through war and peace, through adversity and prosperity, we hold this inauguration every 4 years, and today it falls on Martin Luther King Day. A further reminder that we must strive to uphold the values enshrined in our Constitution, the freedoms, the liberties, and, as is inscribed on the entrance of the United States Supreme Court, equal justice under law. But what makes this moment more than a passing ceremony is all who are watching it across the country, the people of this nation, the ordinary people doing extraordinary things. President Kennedy, who at one point worked as a senator in this building and would often walk through this very rotunda, once said, "In a democracy, every citizen, regardless of interest in politics, holds office. Every one of us is in a position of responsibility." With that responsibility of citizenship comes an obligation not to seek out malice, as President Lincoln once reminded us, but to view others with a generosity of spirit despite our differences. With that responsibility of leadership comes an obligation to stand our ground when we must and find common ground when we can. With everything swirling around us, the hot mess of division, it is on all of us, to quote an incredible songwriter who just happened to be born in my state, to ensure that our nation's democracy is our shelter from the storm. There's a reason this ceremony takes place at the Capitol. In other countries, it might be in a presidential palace or a gilded executive office building. Here it is traditionally held at the Capitol, the People's House. It is a fitting reminder of the system of checks and balances that is the very foundation of our government, 3 equal branches of government. That is how, for nearly 250 years, our great American experiment, grounded in the rule of law, has endured. So, as we inaugurate a new president and vice president, let us remember that the power of those in this room comes from the people. The construction workers who build our country, the teachers and healthcare workers who nurture us, the troops defending our freedoms, and yes, the firefighters in Los Angeles putting themselves on the line for us. Our democracy's strength and grit must match theirs. May God bless our nation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Endurance through the years is the ultimate test. To persevere through time is the truest measure of an idea, an institution, and a nation. Our founders wrote the Constitution so that America could withstand all the twists and turns of time. They wrote it to guide us and to preserve forever our right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But as much as the truths and principles enshrined in our Constitution remain the same, our democracy promises the people the power to change, to chart their own destiny. That's the beauty. That is the importance of democracy. It allows the endurance, the permanence of a nation through change. It allows nations like our United States both to avoid the obstacles and to seize the opportunities God has placed before us, all while staying true to our founding principles. Today is our country's 60th inauguration ceremony. Like all the others before it, it is a celebration of our right to set our uniquely American course. The past several years have been trying at times for many, many Americans, and also for the nations of the free world that we humbly strive to lead. In November, Americans chose again to steer this nation towards greatness, the secure, safe, and prosperous future that our founders envisioned for all of us. And today, we celebrate not only their decision to do so, but also the simple right and wisdom of a free people to make their own choice so that their nation might endure. And now, allow me to welcome Archbishop Timothy Dolan and Reverend Franklin Graham, who will deliver our invocation. Please rise.
Be still and know that I am God, supreme among the nations, supreme on the earth. Let us pray. Remembering General George Washington on his knees at Valley Forge, recalling Abraham Lincoln at his second inaugural, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Remembering General George Patton's instructions to his soldiers as they began the Battle of the Bulge 8 decades ago. Pray. Pray when fighting. Pray alone. Pray with others. Pray by night. Pray by day. Observing the birthday of the Reverend Martin Luther King, who warned, without God, our efforts turn to ashes. We, blessed citizens of this one nation under God, humbled by our claim that in God we trust, gather indeed this Inauguration Day to pray for our President Donald J. Trump, his family, his advisors, his cabinet, his aspirations, his vice president, for the Lord's blessings upon Joseph Biden, for our men and women in uniform, for each other whose hopes are stoked this new year, this Inauguration Day. We cannot err in relying upon that prayer from the Bible, upon which our president will soon place his hand in oath, as we make our own the supplications of King Solomon for wisdom as he began his governance. God of our fathers, in your wisdom you set man to govern your creatures, to govern in holiness and justice, to render justice with integrity. Give our leader wisdom, for he is your servant, aware of his own weakness and brevity of life. If wisdom which comes not from you be not with him, he shall be held in no esteem. Send wisdom from heavens, that she may be with him, that he may know your designs. Please, God, bless America. Please, mend her every flaw. You are the God in whom we trust, who lives and reigns forever and ever. Amen.
Mr. President, the last 4 years, there are times I'm sure you thought it was pretty dark. But look what God has done. We praise him and give him glory. Let us pray. Our Father and our God, thou hast said, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. As the prophet Daniel prayed, blessed be the name of God forever and ever. For wisdom and might are his. He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings. He raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. Our Father, today, as President Donald J. Trump takes the oath of office once again, we come to say thank you, O Lord our God. Father, when Donald Trump's enemies thought he was down and out, you and you alone saved his life and raised him up with strength and power by your mighty hand. We pray for President Trump, that you'll watch over, protect, guide, direct him. Give him your wisdom from your throne on high. We ask that you would bless him and that our nation would be blessed through him. We also ask that you would bless and protect Melania as First Lady. We thank you for the beauty, the warmth, and grace that she shows not only to this nation, but to the whole world. We thank you for Vice President-elect J.D. Vance and his wife Usha and their young family. May he be a strength to President Trump, to stand beside him, to hold up his arms like Aaron held up the arms of Moses in the midst of battle. The prophet Samuel reminded the people, it was you that brought them up from the land of Egypt. And he said, now stand still, that I may reason with you before the Lord. So, Father, we take this moment to stand still, to remember the great things that you have done for this nation. Thank you for the protection, the bounty, the freedoms that we so enjoy. We remember to keep our eyes fixed on you, and may our hearts be inclined to your voice. We know that America can never be great again if we turn our backs on you. We ask for your help, and we pray all of this in the name of the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, your Son, my Savior, and our Redeemer, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Associate Justice Kavanaugh to administer the Vice Presidential Oath of Office.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear.
I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the same,
and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office
on which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Vice President.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chief Justice Roberts to administer the presidential oath of office.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
So there we are, Tom. J.D. Vance sworn in as the Vice President and Donald Trump of the President again. Of the President? That means 47th President. I'm so excited. We heard all the cheers there when they went without a glitch, actually.
Yep, everything went very smoothly. We heard before the two oaths of office. We heard from senators from both parties, from both sides of the aisle. First up was a Democrat senator, then it was a Republican senator, then we had two religious figures, the Archbishop of New York, and then came Reverend Franklin Graham, who is an evangelist, familiar to many Americans. So it's a bit of shared, isn't it, the way they balance it out, make sure everyone is involved, both political parties involved, and as we say, it's culminated with a new president who's just been sworn in.
But Tom, I want to say it's not just political parties who are involved, it's also the families. So we saw J.D. Vance there during his swearing in, his children joined the oath that was taking place, and also his wife, Usher. So it's been a real family affair. And of course, when Donald Trump also officially became the US president, we saw his daughter Ivanka Trump there, his other daughter Tiffany, of course his wife Melania Trump, his two sons too, and Barron. He's very tall, he towers above them all.
He stands out, doesn't he?
He does, definitely stands out, Barron Trump. But what an amazing moment for the families and also, as you said, for democracy. We really saw Republicans and the Democrats really sharing the floor there.
Sure, and it's something that we forget sometimes, perhaps, but in the United States, families are very present on the campaign trail as well. So it's very common to see political candidates with their spouses, with their families, with their partners on the stage with them, very much at their side.
And also, if it comes to J.D. Vance, Donald Trump Jr. actually really advocated for J.D. Vance, and we did see J.D. Vance there become the vice president. So something really interesting when it comes to families, as you said, extremely important.
Indeed. Well, for the benefit of our viewers, we've just seen, as we've been saying, the Vice President J.D. Vance, the 47th President Donald J. Trump sworn in for the second time. The first time there's been a non-consecutive presidency since the 19th century. And we're then expecting to hear from President Trump, a speech from the newly sworn in President Trump. Then, of course, he will get down to business as the day goes on. It's going to be a very long day for him and many who are in his inner sanctum.
Very, very long day indeed. I just wanted to ask you, how many words do you think Donald Trump had in his 2017 inauguration speach? Don't look. He's looking at my papers.
Actually, I couldn't possibly say. How many words were in the speech?
Yes.
I don't know, a couple of thousand?
1,400 words, apparently, much shorter than Biden's in 2021. The inaugural speech can really vary from up to 45 minutes to 17 minutes. So we'll see what Trump has to say and how upbeat he'll be, what his main message to get across to the country and the nation will be in that speech, Tom.
We're being told it will be upbeat. That's one of some excerpts of the speech have been released by various news agencies. We've got a couple of clues as to what he's going to say. So it seems like there will be some upbeat messages, more upbeat than in the last Trump administration when he took office in 2017, in the inauguration ceremony of 2017, where he painted a bleak picture of the United States and how he was going to turn everything around, described a country that was really in severe decline. But it's been said this time he's going to paint a rather different picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing, Trump says over the next 4 years under his presidency, America will take off like a rocket ship. So that's something he's definitely been speaking about. Donald Trump's also, before he has become president again, we've seen today, he's been having a bit of a good time, I'd say. He became the Time Magazine Person of the Year. He beat a number of high-profile people, including Elon Musk. And we must say Elon Musk is there right now, along with a whole lot of other tech bros, including Mark Zuckerberg. So things really seem to be changing around from 4 years ago. He's had a lot of endorsements, and there seems to be a lot of powerful people on his side this time round.
And he's overcome quite considerable adversity in the form of those legal cases that really plagued him throughout the campaign trail. And in a parallel universe, we've had people telling us on this channel, on Arabiya News, telling us that in a parallel universe, Donald Trump, had he not won the election in November, might very well have been convicted and might very well be doing time. So this is a major reversal of fortunes for Donald J. Trump, who at 78 years of age and some 200 days, I believe, is the oldest president ever to take office. Joe Biden was 78 years of age, but only 60 days. So he's a tiny bit younger when he took office 4 years ago.
But his bombastic style of delivering speeches hasn't changed, has it? He's still got all the youth when it comes to a campaign rally, Tom.
He certainly seems to have plenty of energy. Let's listen to what's being said.
Thank you very much, everybody. Well, thank you very, very much. Vice President Vance, Speaker Johnson, Senator Thune, Chief Justice Roberts, Justices of the United States Supreme Court, President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and my fellow citizens. The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end. And our top priority will be to create a nation that is proud, prosperous, and free. America will soon be greater, stronger, and far more exceptional than ever before. I return to the presidency confident and optimistic that we are at the start of a thrilling new era of national success. A tide of change is sweeping the country, sunlight is pouring over the entire world, and America has the chance to seize this opportunity like never before. But first, we must be honest about the challenges we face. While they are plentiful, they will be annihilated by this great momentum that the world is now witnessing in the United States of America. As we gather today, our government confronts a crisis of trust. For many years, a radical and corrupt establishment has extracted power and wealth from our citizens while the pillars of our society lay broken and seemingly in complete disrepair. We now have a government that cannot manage even a simple crisis at home, while at the same time stumbling into a continuing catalog of catastrophic events abroad. It fails to protect our magnificent, law-abiding American citizens, but provides sanctuary and protection for dangerous criminals, many from prisons and mental institutions that have illegally entered our country from all over the world. We have a government that has given unlimited funding to the defense of foreign borders, but refuses to defend American borders or, more importantly, its own people. Our country can no longer deliver services in times of emergency, as recently shown by the wonderful people of North Carolina, been treated so badly. And other states who are still suffering from a hurricane that took place many months ago. Or more recently, Los Angeles, where we're watching fires still tragically burn from weeks ago without even a token of defense. They're raging through the houses and communities, even affecting some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in our country, some of whom are sitting here right now. They don't have a home any longer. That's interesting. But we can't let this happen. Everyone is unable to do anything about it. That's going to change. We have a public health system that does not deliver in times of disaster, yet more money is spent on it than any country anywhere in the world. And we have an education system that teaches our children to be ashamed of themselves in many cases, to hate our country despite the love that we try so desperately to provide to them. All of this will change starting today, and it will change very quickly. My recent election is a mandate to completely and totally reverse a horrible betrayal and all of these many betrayals that have taken place, and to give the people back their faith, their wealth, their democracy, and indeed their freedom. From this moment on, America's decline is over. Our liberties and our nation's glorious destiny will no longer be denied, and we will immediately restore the integrity, competency, and loyalty of America's government. Over the past 8 years, I have been tested and challenged more than any president in our 250-year history, and I've learned a lot along the way. The journey to reclaim our republic has not been an easy one, that I can tell you. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much. That is why each day under our administration of American patriots, we will be working to meet every crisis with dignity and power and strength. We will move with purpose and speed to bring back hope, prosperity, safety, and peace for citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. For American citizens, January 20th, 2025 is Liberation Day. It is my hope that our recent presidential election will be remembered as the greatest and most consequential election in the history of our country. As our victory showed, the entire nation is rapidly unifying behind our agenda with dramatic increases in support from virtually every element of our society, young and old, men and women, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, urban, suburban, rural. And very importantly, we had a powerful win in all 7 swing states. And the popular vote, we won by millions of people. To the Black and Hispanic communities, I want to thank you for the tremendous outpouring of love and trust that you have shown me with your vote. We set records, and I will not forget it. I've heard your voices in the campaign, and I look forward to working with you in the years to come. Today is Martin Luther King Day, and his honor, this will be a great honor, but in his honor we will strive together to make his dream a reality. We will make his dream come true. Thank you. Thank you. National unity is now returning to America, and confidence and pride is soaring like never before. In everything we do, my administration will be inspired by a strong pursuit of excellence and unrelenting success. We will not forget our country. We will not forget our Constitution, and we will not forget our God. Can't do that. Today, I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense. First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. All illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release. And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country. Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And by invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks, bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities. As Commander-in-Chief, I have no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions, and that is exactly what I am going to do. We will do it at a level that nobody's ever seen before. Next, I will direct all members of my cabinet to marshal the vast powers at their disposal to defeat what was record inflation and rapidly bring down costs and prices. The inflation crisis was caused by massive overspending and escalating energy prices, and that is why today I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill. America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again, right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it. With my actions today, we will end the Green New Deal, and we will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers. In other words, you'll be able to buy the car of your choice. We will build automobiles in America again at a rate that nobody could have dreamt possible just a few years ago. And thank you to the auto workers of our nation for your inspiring vote of confidence. We did tremendously with their vote. I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. For this purpose, we are establishing the External Revenue Service to collect all tariffs, duties, and revenues. It will be massive amounts of money pouring into our treasury, coming from foreign sources. The American dream will soon be back and thriving like never before to restore competence and effectiveness to our federal government. My administration will establish the brand new Department of Government Efficiency. After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents, something I know something about. We will not allow that to happen. It will not happen again. Under my leadership, we will restore fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law. And we are going to bring law and order back to our cities. This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay. And I will sign an order to stop our warriors from being subjected to radical political theories and social experiments while on duty. It's going to end immediately. Our armed forces will be freed to focus on their sole mission, defeating America's enemies. Like in 2017, we will again build the strongest military the world has ever seen. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier. I'm pleased to say that as of yesterday, one day before I assumed office, the hostages in the Middle East are coming back home to their families. Thank you. America will reclaim its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, most respected nation on earth, inspiring the awe and admiration of the entire world. A short time from now, we are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and we will restore the name of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley, where it should be and where it belongs. President McKinley made our country very rich through tariffs and through talent. He was a natural businessman and gave Teddy Roosevelt the money for many of the great things he did, including the Panama Canal, which has foolishly been given to the country of Panama after the United States. The United States, I mean, think of this, spent more money than ever spent on a project before and lost 38,000 lives in the building of the Panama Canal. We have been treated very badly from this foolish gift that should have never been made, and Panama's promise to us has been broken. The purpose of our deal and the spirit of our treaty has been totally violated. American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form, and that includes the United States Navy. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. Above all, my message to Americans today is that it is time for us to once again act with courage, vigor, and the vitality of history's greatest civilization. So as we liberate our nation, we will lead it to new heights of victory and success. We will not be deterred. Together we will end the chronic disease epidemic and keep our children safe, healthy, and disease-free. The United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. Ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation, and right now our nation is more ambitious than any other. There's no nation like our nation. Americans are explorers, builders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and pioneers. The spirit of the frontier is written into our hearts. The call of the next great adventure resounds from within our souls. Our American ancestors turned a small group of colonies on the edge of a vast continent into a mighty republic of the most extraordinary citizens on earth. No one comes close. Americans pushed thousands of miles through a rugged land of untamed wilderness. They crossed deserts, scaled mountains, braved untold dangers, won the Wild West, ended slavery, rescued millions from tyranny, lifted billions from poverty, harnessed electricity, split the atom, launched mankind into the heavens, and put the universe of human knowledge into the palm of the human hand. If we work together, there is nothing we cannot do and no dream we cannot achieve. Many people thought it was impossible for me to stage such a historic political comeback. But as you see today, here I am. The American people have spoken. I stand before you now as proof that you should never believe that something is impossible to do. In America, the impossible is what we do best. From New York to Los Angeles, from Philadelphia to Phoenix, from Chicago to Miami, from Houston to right here in Washington, D.C., our country was forged and built by the generations of patriots who gave everything they had for our rights and for our freedom. They were farmers and soldiers, cowboys and factory workers, steel workers and coal miners, police officers and pioneers who pushed onward, marched forward, and let no obstacle defeat their spirit or their pride. Together they laid down the railroads, raised up the skyscrapers, built great highways, won 2 world wars, defeated fascism and communism, and triumphed over every single challenge that they faced. After all we have been through together, we stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. With your help, we will restore America promise, and we will rebuild the nation that we love, and we love it so much. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. So to every parent who dreams for their child, and every child who dreams for their future, I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We are going to win like never before. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. In recent years, our nation has suffered greatly, but we are going to bring it back and make it great again, greater than ever before. We will be a nation like no other, full of compassion, courage, and exceptionalism. Our power will stop all wars and bring a new spirit of unity to a world that has been angry, violent, and totally unpredictable. America will be respected again and admired again, including by people of religion, faith, and goodwill. We will be prosperous. We will be proud. We will be strong, and we will win like never before. We will not be conquered. We will not be intimidated. We will not be broken, and we will not fail. From this day on, the United States of America will be a free, sovereign, and independent nation. We will stand bravely. We will live proudly. We will dream boldly, and nothing will stand in our way because we are Americans. The future is ours, and our golden age has just begun. Thank you. God bless America. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Right, Tom, that was Donald Trump's inaugural address. Trump says he wants to be a peacemaker. He got a standing ovation for that. He also said the golden age of America begins right now. He said the country will be respected again and the envy of every nation. And he says he simply wants things to be America first again. One thing I found really interesting is we know that Donald Trump and Elon Musk have really become close in this campaign. And Trump said that he wants to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. Ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation. There we are, Tom.
Absolutely. So lots of points to pick up on. Perhaps we can cross to our next guest, Mick Mulvaney, former Chief of Staff to Donald Trump, who has been listening in as we have been as well. Great to have you with us again, Mick. We just saw Donald Trump placing his hand on the Bible, swearing the oath of office, giving that inaugural speech. The second Trump presidency has now begun. Your immediate thoughts?
Oh, a couple different thoughts. I thought the speech was a little bit low key. Let's talk about the speech. Let's talk about the policies. The speech was a little more low key than I expected. Can you not hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you. Please go ahead, Mick.
Oh, I'm sorry. The speech is a lot more low key than I thought. Keep in mind, this speech was designed originally to be outdoors in front of a crowd of several 100,000 people. They moved it now indoors to the rotunda, which only holds about 600 people. It's an entirely different setting, and it was a little bit lower energy speech than I think you would expect. That being said, there's not a lot of new material there, something he'd been talking about during the campaign. The policies, however, as he was giving the speech, the administration put out several statements regarding some of the policies that he was describing in the speech and the details on what they would be doing moving forward, specifically on things like immigration and energy. We've heard that there could be as many as 200 executive orders issued just today. So while the speech is going on and now they move into the pomp and circumstance and the parties and the rallies this afternoon, the policies are already starting to kick in.
How much of a departure was the content of that inaugural speech from the sort of the more typical standard inaugural speeches that we might have heard of over the years? What do you think was a departure?
It's a good question. Most inaugural speeches are not very memorable. We remember John Kennedy's to a certain extent. Certainly remember Abraham Lincoln's is very famous, but for the most part, they're not the great speeches. This was a good speech. It reminded me more of a State of the Union speech, which is sort of a list of things that you want any president wants to accomplish, than it was any high soaring sort of rhetorical speech. There was some of that in the end about uniting the country, making America great again, as you would expect, et cetera. I thought it was a good speech. I think it would have been better outdoors again, but much been higher energy with a larger crowd. But generally speaking, probably not that memorable, other than the comments about the policies, which are going to drive all the attention now as we move into the early days of the second Trump presidency.
Yeah, I just was wondering, I mean, because we did hear President Trump taking aim at the Biden administration in a most unveiled way. I mean, very direct, talking about some of the disastrous policies of the Biden administration as he sees it. He talked obviously about what he called the unfair weaponization of the justice system. I mean, that was quite predictable. But what about taking aim at the outgoing administration? I mean, is that something that incoming presidents typically do?
Yeah, it's not, although if anybody didn't expect that from Donald Trump, they haven't been paying attention. The language that I picked up on that I thought was interesting was he talked about a betrayal of the nation. And keep in mind, again, because they are inside today, because of the weather, and it's such a cramped setting, the people that he's effectively accusing of being betrayers are sitting just over his left shoulder to his rear. So they're within 5 or 6 feet. That has to be a little bit uncomfortable for both of the people in that circumstance. But yeah, there were pieces of this speech that sounded like a rally as much as a State of the Union speech or his inaugural speech. And certainly the betrayal part was part of it. The reference to the weaponization of the legal system was part of it. And again, the different location, I think, changed the tenor of the speech. It's hard. It's easy for me to sit here across the ocean and yell at you and call you all sorts of awful names. It would be a little bit difficult to do that if you're sitting in the chair next to me.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it looked pretty uncomfortable at various stages, especially during the standing ovations when we saw the outgoing president remain firmly in his seat for all but one, I think, of the issues, which was, of course, the hostage release in Gaza, something he's stood up for. What sort of clues do we get about the incoming administration from, for example, promises to increase the wealth and expand the territory of the United States? What do you think he's got in mind?
Yeah, well, specifically to your question, I think he is interested in Greenland. I think he's probably more interested in Greenland than anything else. We dealt with this when I was chief of staff in the first term because of the geopolitical importance, the growing geopolitical importance of the Arctic. Greenland is going to be front and center, I think, on just about any one of our foreign policies. It's a way to counter China, who's also looking to make inroads in the Arctic, et cetera. So I think you could pay close attention to that. The Panama Canal is more of a China play as well. I don't think he's really interested in invading Panama as much as he is sending the message to China that their influence in this hemisphere, at least, won't be tolerated. On the Gulf of Mexico, I thought that was quite interesting. He's officially renamed it, I guess, the Gulf of America. I know that will get a lot of media attention. I actually did the research, and apparently of 2 or 3 people who are given credit for the discovery, the European discovery, at least, of the Gulf of Mexico, one of them is the Italian cartographer Amerigo Vespucci. So it probably makes sense to call it the Gulf of America, since we call the continents America anyway. So I think that's put aside. But to the more general question, not on the specifics, what are you going to see in the second term? It's going to be a lot more clear-minded and assertive on the policies. I think you saw this during the Senate confirmation hearings. These folks who he's nominated are not shy about pushing Donald Trump's agenda. When I was up for confirmation 8 years ago, I was told to be quiet, be polite, keep my head down, get confirmed, don't fight back. Clearly, that message did not go out to the people who are nominated for the cabinet positions this year. There's going to be a lot more assertive approach to the Trump policy in the second administration than there was even in the first.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you very much indeed, Mick Mulvaney, former Chief of Staff to Donald Trump. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay.
Donald Trump over there, as we know, he's become the 47th president right now. And that was a really interesting conversation I thought you had with Mick Mulvaney, just having a really good think about what's to come and what we heard in that speech. And what I said earlier when you and I were watching it, I thought it was a bit of a toned down speech. And I think that was also said by Mulvaney there. So during the election campaign, Tom, Donald Trump was quick to criticize the role and responsibilities of the FBI after agents searched his Mar-a-Lago home for classified documents in 2022. As a result, Trump has recruited loyalists at the Department of Justice, including the FBI. His choice for FBI director is Kash Patel, who has been a supporter through the Trump campaign. Now, let's go to Frank Figliuzzi, who is a former assistant director of the FBI. Frank, thank you so much for joining us. Frank, first of all, let's start with an important message from Trump's speech. He declared Mexican cartels as terrorists. What do you make of this, and what did you make of the speech we just watched?
Well, we certainly have some nuggets there that tell us where things are going, and will go quickly, that we should pay attention to from a national security front. And as you mentioned, the designation of drug cartels, unnamed right now, but we do recognize certain large cartels in the U.S. government that will be designated as terrorist organizations. That unleashes quite a bit of the toolkit of law enforcement and even the military, and this is where we should pay special attention, on designated terrorist organizations. So if he's going to designate, say, for example, the Sinaloa cartel as a terrorist organization, that means we could treat them as hostile combatants. You could literally see the U.S. military targeting for assassination leadership of drug cartels in other sovereign nations. That would be quite interesting.
Frank, what would happen if that was actually to play out, as you just said there, something we have to watch really closely?
Well, of course, you know, the other nations that those cartels exist in would certainly have something to say about attacks on their soil. But let's be honest here. Throughout history, we've seen very minimal cooperation from countries like Colombia, like Mexico, with regard to totally dismantling their organizations. What I'm concerned about, though, is if our military becomes caught up in targeting individual leadership in cartels, and we know that throughout history, leaders come and go, and there's others ready to replace those leaders, we could see our military actually distracted from their actual mission, which is protecting the borders of the United States, protecting national security interests around the world.
Drones, snipers, razor wire fencing, and 25,000 personnel are among security measures being deployed for Donald Trump's inauguration today. What other precautions have been taken, and how much work goes into something like this, Frank?
Yeah, it's literally tens of thousands of law enforcement officers, National Guard troops, and lots of money. And the move to put the inaugural ceremony indoors instead of outdoors actually was a benefit for security procedures. Yet, let's not forget that throughout the afternoon and evening, you will see several large, important parties and receptions throughout Washington, D.C. that might be viewed as softer targets for people who have ill will. You've got the Capital One Arena, where people who could not be outside watching an outdoor ceremony were put inside. You've got an estimated 250,000 Americans wandering around D.C. who thought they'd be admitted to the outdoor area and can't even get into the Capital One Arena. So now they're in town looking for something to do. So we've got to get through this day and tonight with regard to safety and security.
Okay, so Frank, there's something I want to ask you about, and that's Kash Patel. He's Donald Trump's pick for FBI director. You've previously said this appointment could spell trouble for the FBI. How concerned are you about Kash Patel, and what's the problem?
I'm deeply concerned not only for his lack of qualifications, but for his public statements. We need only look to what he's told us he intends to do to raise our concerns. He intends, he says, to go after the perceived political enemies of Donald Trump, to go after the investigators, the prosecutors. And my concern there is that the FBI's resources and tremendous power could be unleashed on people without proper predication to even open an investigation. You've seen Joe Biden, as early as this morning, pardoning people he thinks are going to be unlawfully persecuted by Donald Trump. So not that they've done anything wrong, but that they're going to spend the next years defending themselves simply for doing their job. That's the concern that Kash Patel brings, that he could abuse the power. It wouldn't be the first time we've seen an FBI director do unlawful things. J. Edgar Hoover in the 60s and very early 70s before he passed actually abused his power a lot, particularly against the Black community, Martin Luther King, and the Black Panthers with illegal wiretaps, breaking into people's homes, planting evidence, putting in microphones. That's the concern I have.
So Kash Patel has an axe to grind, in other words, according to you. Donald Trump spoke there about his assassination attempt during his inaugural speech. In some ways, you know, had a very muted tone. What is the security around Donald Trump going to look like now? And how much of an assassination risk is he? And is this why he wants someone like Kash Patel in his corner?
Well, it'll be interesting. First, there is a high risk for Donald Trump as president now. Look, we've got two still under investigation, 2 assassination attempts against him. We cannot forget that the country of Iran, a designated state sponsor of terrorism, still very much wants Donald Trump dead in retribution for his targeting of their senior general who was in Syria at the time. That is an active threat from a state sponsor of terrorism. So you're going to see unprecedented measures for security around this president, things we have not seen before, the use of robots, extensive use of drones, lots of indoor events and bulletproof glass around him. That's what we're headed into.
Thank you so much, Frank, for joining me today on this historic day for the US. I really appreciate it, and especially speaking to me about security. Frank Figliuzzi, former Assistant Director of the FBI. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, so we've been watching the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States.
Yes, indeed, Tom.
A lot of key issues brought up in that inaugural speech, and a tone that we've been describing as variously solemn and also uniting. He sought to unite Americans, he said, in his speech. And of course, we're raising some of those issues with our panel of guests today. You've just been speaking there to a former FBI Assistant Director. And interesting to see that, in fact, Donald Trump did not swear on the Bible, in fact, as he made that oath. But J.D. Vance did. So that's an interesting departure from traditional swearing-in ceremonies that we've seen over the years. So clearly a historic occasion, because we were seeing there the oldest man ever to take office being sworn in at the age of 78, just slightly older than Joe Biden was when he took office. And of course, he's been through numerous legal wranglings, making this return to office all the more surprising and unlikely. Very few people had seen this coming a few years ago. And Donald Trump said himself he staged a comeback that many people couldn't have imagined.
And Tom, I feel like he really touched on that during that inaugural speech. He said, no dream we cannot achieve. He's basically saying that he has done the impossible. And that's what is the lifeblood of Americans, to make America great again, to really, look at the nation. And this is the golden age of America. He says that begins right now. But once again, a really historic day that we're seeing. And of course, we're just speaking to somebody who was from the FBI, a former member, and he was really saying security around Donald Trump. Actually, the fact that it was held inside made it a lot easier for them to make sure things were safe. As you said, 2 assassination attempts on his life. So things have seemed to have gone smoothly as we get to this stage in the game.
They certainly have. A smooth transition and a smooth inaugural ceremony.
Mm-hmm. So, as well as his loyal group of supporters, Trump has very many critics, some coming from within his own family. And we can now speak to Donald Trump's nephew, that's Fred Trump III. He joins me right now. Fred, thank you so much and good evening to you. So your uncle has just been sworn in as the president once again. How are you feeling? And is your part of the family actually watching it?
I'm watching it. My guess is my kids are probably not. My wife is downstairs with our youngest son who has disabilities, so she's tending to him, which is more important. I just finished watching his address. I was there on the platform in 2017. Still some dark tones to it, but I wish the best for the country.
Yeah, in terms of what we learned from that speech, what really stood out for you, Fred?
On a personal basis, he looked pretty somber, which I still, no matter how anybody parse it, he wanted the big outdoor address. So we'll leave that alone. He did what a president should be, having the country aspire to something better than we have. I will still contend that America is a great country right now. If we can make it better, fantastic. We need to hold our leaders to account. And I look to the Democrats to make sure that they will work in tandem with Donald's administration when it's the right thing to do, but hold him also to account when things don't go right.
So you voted for Kamala Harris. We saw her there during the inaugural speech. She didn't stand up to everything that Trump said. She kept seated for a few things. Do you regret your vote at all? Do you wish you had now voted for Trump? As he says, the golden age of America begins right now.
Well, no, I don't regret it, because for me, it's policy over politics. I have always been a Democrat since the first time I voted for a presidential election in 1980. Donald, as you may know, was a Democrat for a majority of his life. It's the policies that are important to me. As far as entering the golden age of America, sure, that's easy to say. Let's talk in a year's time, 2 years' time, to see where things are going.
Fred, Trump arrived at St. John's Church service earlier alongside his family, including his wife Melania. During the inaugural ceremony, we also saw him surrounded by family members. I wanted to ask you, what can we expect from the Trump dynasty during his second term?
Well, as you probably know, Ivanka and Jared certainly will not have the influence on a day-to-day basis that they did in the first term. I think Donnie, and I call him Donnie, I can never call my cousin Don Jr., I think he will have perhaps more influence than any others. I know he relies on Melania for much, and we'll see. You know, it's a lot of it is going to depend on how things go, and we'll know pretty much in the first 100 days, as a cliche, to see how Donald is rolling out his policies. But you know, we have to keep tabs on it.
And obviously, this is your uncle Donald Trump's second and ordinarily final term. I say ordinary because the Constitution states that you can obviously only serve 2 terms as President of the United States. Do you think he's got someone in the family in mind as a potential successor? Do you think he's groomed someone up? And who is that someone?
Well, as I mentioned, I think Donnie would be the natural politician. I think Donald worries about Donald right now. He may, as I've said in my book, All in the Family, Constitution be damned, he may try to run it out again in 2028. You'll have to wait and see.
Fred, I just actually want to say something to it. You really have got to hand it to your uncle for winning the White House twice. And would you ring him to congratulate him at all?
Oh, sure. I absolutely will. And much like, you know, I had when the book was rolled out in July, I was asked the question all the time, did you reach out to Donald during the assassination attempts? And the answer is absolutely yes. He's my uncle. Let's not make any bones about it. He is my uncle. We shared many great times over the years, without question. And I wish him the best. I wish him great health. And I want success for this country. But again, if things aren't going right and policies that he puts into place will harm children. Listen, again, I have a child with complex disabilities. Many of the proposals, especially coming out of the Department of Education, frighten me for not only minority children, but for children with disabilities and adults. So those are the things I'm going to be looking at very carefully. I've been very vocal, and I will continue to do so to advocate on behalf of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
And when you have an idea or when you express a concern about something that your uncle has said, I mean, did you in the first administration, for example, put it to him? Did you debate it to him? Was he open to listen to perhaps some words of concern or words of criticism from a nephew?
I'm sorry, you froze for a second. I didn't hear your entire question.
I was just asking whether perhaps during the first administration you'd ever tried contacting your uncle to say, listen, I've got concerns about something, I don't agree with something you've done, and I just wondered whether you felt you were ever listened to by your uncle, if ever you expressed a concern.
Well, I absolutely have one example, again, I detail in the book. It was during one of the mass shootings at Uvalde, and I was driving home and I heard the news and I got on the phone. And this is one thing I definitely give Donald credit for. He would call me, I'd call him. So I called him that day and it was very upsetting. I said, Donald, you've got to do something about this. Okay. These mass shootings are not going away. You have to do something about it. And his answer was, pal, there's nothing I can do.
And knowing his character, and when you look at the lineup for, I'm sorry, you probably hear it said all the time, Trump 2.0, and we'll probably stop calling it that fairly soon. But when you look at the lineup, who's in the new administration and who's not, and obviously we don't have a full picture yet, but I mean, when you see someone, for example, like Elon Musk, or you look at some of the other characters in the room, some quite strong characters, knowing your uncle's temperament as you do you think everyone's going to remain on good terms, or do you think we've got the makings here for some feuds or some rifts?
Yeah, sure. Of course. I mean, but that could happen. It happens with every administration, will happen with this. And I have joked for decades that nobody has a larger ego than Donald on this planet. He surrounds himself with guys who have major egos, guys who have a lot more money than him, but he holds the power right now. So they're going to have to learn how to play well with him going forward.
Fred, Donald Trump is back in his happy place. He loves the crowd, actually. That's something I think we can all agree with. But I want to ask you about your memoir, the book that you've published. You've touched on it a few times during this conversation with Tom and I. It really sheds light on your family and, of course, on your uncle. Why did you choose to publish this book just 5 months ago when Trump was running for president again?
The two simple answers to this. My wife, Lisa, and I had planned on writing a book years ago, focusing on, well, my father, who was a very charismatic and caring guy, who was Donald's older brother, who unfortunately died way too young. And again, my son, William, who is the most inspirational person in my life. The story was going to be about that. But William was living at home, and when Donald started running in 2015 with a lot of his very, well, I'll say challenge policies that he was putting out, our house was constantly being infiltrated by reporters. We had dead animals thrown on our lawn. Very simply, William was living at home. We wanted to wait until he moved away, which he did that summer. And also, January 6th was just a bridge too far for me also, that I needed to reach out and let people know. Again, I will say, I always had a great relationship with Donald. We had troubled times at some parts. We got over it. I'm not so sure we'll get over the rift now, but I do wish him good health, safety, and doing the best he can for this country.
Fred Trump III, Donald Trump's nephew, I just want to say a really big thank you for joining us this evening and for all your insights.
Okay, so great to listen there to Fred Trump III. Spoken to him before, very interesting and amazing, speaking to him right in the middle of the campaign when he was very much in the Kamala Harris campaign team. And great watching the inauguration just now. 3 former presidents were in attendance today, Leanne. We had Barack Obama, George W. Bush and Bill Clinton looking on with, of course, Joe Biden, who became a former president during the midst of that. And one other interesting thing, because we've been talking about this inauguration ceremony being one of firsts and historic and everything else, the first one to be held indoors since 1985. Flags are supposed to be flying at half-mast across the United States on all government buildings because of President Carter's death on the 29th of December. And ordinarily, the mourning period would carry on for 30 days. But in fact, that mourning period isn't over yet, but they did raise the flags to full staff today. They'll go back down to half staff tomorrow. So that's an unusual aspect of all of this. Well, Donald Trump's return to power may be celebrated by the more than 77 million Americans who voted for him in November, but the prospect of another 4 years is unsettling for some at the United Nations. Well, the world body has faced both financial and credibility challenges in recent years. Donald Trump himself has previously labelled the UN, quote, an underperformer. Well, our very own correspondent Mitch McCann filed this report for us.
This year, America came to the United Nations stronger.
During his first term, Donald Trump said the United Nations had huge potential, but he felt it wasn't living up to that potential, a point he made in his final speech to the General Assembly in 2020, delivered virtually because of the pandemic.
If the United Nations is to be an effective organization, it must focus on the real problems of the world.
But his first administration focused on withdrawing from several UN agencies, including its HIV and AIDS program, and even began the process of withdrawing from the World Health Organization. Daniel Forti, a UN analyst, says many diplomats and UN officials who lived through Trump's first term were concerned about his worldview and his approach to the organization.
I think this time around there's less surprise, but equal as much concern about what the next 4 years will mean for the World Organization. But there's also a reality that diplomats and UN officials need to work with the U.S.
That's because it's such a major political power, one that contributes a large portion of funding to the overall UN budget, an organisation struggling with cash flow. It has been reported that the UN is already tens of billions of dollars short of the funds it needs to run its operations.
Yeah, I think there would certainly be a fear in the United Nations that he will hold the organisation to ransom somehow, withhold payments, keeping in mind that the US is about 22% of the UN budget, that he might withhold that money until he gets something that he wants.
Analysts we've spoken to in recent months have suggested that if Mr. Trump and the US government decide to pull back funding or scale back involvement in UN agencies or programs, others, namely China, may step forward. A nation Mr. Trump views as one of America's key rivals.
We're likely to see the US try and view the UN as a primary arena to manage its competition with China, and there is a world where China does take advantage of any space where the UN recedes from.
Daniel Forti says he'll be watching America's approach to the war in Ukraine, particularly given President Joe Biden's support for Ukraine and Mr. Trump's hopes to reach an immediate deal. Its policy is likely to be shaped by America's next UN ambassador, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who once labelled the UN a den of anti-Semitism. As the world watches to see what Mr. Trump's second term will entail, many at the United Nations are holding their breath, wondering if the president-elect will focus on regions battling conflict and disease, or if he'll focus more on issues at home. Mitch McCann, Arabiya News, New York.
A crackdown on immigration was a key part of Donald Trump's election campaign and is expected to be one of his first executive orders. It's believed mass deportations could start taking place as early as tomorrow, with post-inauguration immigration raids planned in Chicago. So-called Operation Safeguard by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, well, better known as ICE, could last till the following Monday. We can now go live to Eagle Pass, Texas, on the US-Mexico border to speak to our correspondent there, Toni Waterman. Toni, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. What did you make of Donald Trump's inauguration speech and what could happen on the southern border?
Well, he hit on all of the marks that he promised during the campaign. As you said, immigration and immigration crackdown reform was a main pillar of his re-election campaign. And we heard the president confirm that he is going to declare a national emergency along the southern border. That is going to free up funds and resources and even help mobilize military assets, National Guards troops that will come down to places like here, right across the border from Mexico, where they can continue building things like the border wall, also detention camps. Texas has offered up land for detention camps to be built for people that are on the process of being detained and deported. And also those National Guards troops could be used to help keep order during what we are expecting to be these nationwide raids, which are going to start in the early hours of Tuesday morning. We also heard from the president that he is going to reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy. That is a policy he introduced under his previous tenureship, and it leaves people who are seeking asylum in the United States across the border in Mexico as they undergo that process. Mexican officials, though, have not said whether or not they've had conversations with the incoming Trump administration about these policies or whether or not this is a unilateral move by the United States. He also said that he is going to designate drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. This is going to make it particularly hard for organizations to work with these types of groups, whether it's for financing or whether it's for trade or any sort of commerce. And he said that he's going to invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. He said he's going to allow him to direct the government to really crack down on gangs and criminal networks. Although I have to say the Aliens Enemies Act is really a power that's given to the president in wartime situations that allows them to detain and deport people that they believe to be from enemy nations. This was last used during World War II in the United States for Japanese internment camps. So perhaps this could pave the way for those types of things as well. And he said that as the commander-in-chief, he has no greater responsibility than to protect U.S. citizens from invasion. And of course, invasion is that word that we have been hearing from Donald Trump, from Republicans for years now, which then paves the way for these types of policies to be put in place.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. And I'm just wondering, I mean, obviously looking at you there, it looks like it's extremely cold on the southern border. But how do you think these messages and this pledge of cracking down in the way that Donald Trump is pledging to crack down on illegal immigration, how do you think that message has gone down with communities close to the southern border? I mean, will that likely have been well received in communities that perhaps feel like the previous administration didn't do enough?
Yes, for some of these communities along the border, like here in Eagle Pass, I mean, this was really ground zero a year ago, last December, when there was this massive flood of migrants coming across the border. There were more than 4,000 individuals that were being apprehended every single day. Those numbers have really dropped down to a trickle, partly because of Biden administration policies that were put in place last June, but also because Mexican officials have stepped in and they're stopping these caravans that are making their way from the very southern part of Mexico up to the U.S.-Mexico border. So they're getting help in those areas. Traditionally, these have actually been very democratic strongholds along the U.S. southern border. There are very large immigrant communities, but that has changed in the last election. There is a number of places here that for the very first time went Republican, and part of the reason was because they felt as if the Biden administration wasn't doing enough to stop the illegal immigrant flow. For people that are here illegally, I've been talking to a lot of NGOs, migrant aid groups, and they've been telling their members, their community, to prepare for the worst, to really get their affairs in order, get their paperwork ready, talk to lawyers, know what their rights are here in the United States, even if they are here illegally. So there's a lot of apprehension, partly because the Trump administration at this point has not ruled out family separations. And there are a lot of migrants who come over to the United States that are here for years, if not decades, that end up having families. And there's concerns of what happens to those family units if the parents are rounded up in these raids.
Tony, that is something I actually wanted to touch on with you right there. What this will mean for the 11 million undocumented migrants living over in the US who have established a life there. Can we even begin to understand where things are going to change for them and what the future holds?
Well, at this point, Trump officials are saying that their primary targets are going to be gangs and criminals in these types of raids. Although they did say that if they find anybody that is in the United States illegally, that they will also be rounded up. There's also a lot of concern that people who have been granted temporary protective status under the Biden administration will lose that status and then be eligible for deportation. And then there are all of these individuals who are already in the system, who have come over, who have applied for asylum, have been denied asylum, but then have not left the United States. The government knows where these individuals live, what their phone numbers are. They know how to get in contact with them. So there is a lot of concern on that front for these individuals. But for all of this to actually happen, it is going to require the cooperation of local and state governments. And there are a number of Democratic leaders already that have said that they will not aid in this effort to deport people. And as you mentioned, a lot of these people have been here for decades. They say that they are pillars of their community. Many of them pay taxes like regular Americans. They've established lives here. And it could have a really adverse impact on certain sectors of the U.S. economy. When we think about the hospitality sector, when we think about the construction construction sector, particularly in places like Texas, like California, that is now going to be rebuilding from these massive wildfires. This is a type of demographic that is in those industries, that are vital to those industries. So whether or not they are going to be able to deport 11 million individuals is unclear. But President Trump did say earlier today that he will deport millions and millions and millions of people.
Toni Waterman in Eagle Pass, Texas. Thank you so much for joining Tom and I this evening.
Okay, so what will the next 4 years look like for the United States under a second Trump administration? Well, let's speak now to Republican strategist Chris Licata. Chris, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I expect, like you, like us, you were tuned in listening to Donald Trump's speech and his choices of words and listening out for the sort of rhetoric. What do we learn? What do we know now about what the second presidency might look like that we didn't know earlier on today?
Well, good evening. Obviously, it's evening there. Good evening. Thank you for having me. I was laser focused onto his speech. I thought he did extremely, extremely well. It definitely read very similar to what he's promised. He's promised to close the southern border. He's promised to get our economy back on track. And he's promised to end the bureaucratic control of the American people. The entire theme of today very much struck to all of that, and I think he did very, very well.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember his inaugural speech in 2017, but it was quite a dark picture he painted of America. He talked about American carnage. This time around, talking about a brand new day for America. Did it sound overall like a more upbeat sort of a tone that he struck?
Not only did he strike an upbeat tone, there is an upbeat tone. There's an upbeat tone in the city. There's an upbeat tone throughout the country. I drove here from Florida and I stopped along the way. There's a complete different, everyone's calling it a vibe shift. I personally don't like the word vibe, but it is a new day. It is a golden era for America. It is a golden new age. And he's leading us into that. And versus, I think, like you said, his speech in 2017, which was a bit darker, which was a bit differently phrased.
Chris, as you say there, it's Leanne here. As you say there, it's quite interesting. You say this was an upbeat speech. It's a golden age for America. But we were just talking ahead of you about the 11 million undocumented migrants living in the US and their future hanging in the balance. What can we expect from this? And what's going to play out in the next 4 years for these people who have made America their home?
Yeah, well, just in how you're phrasing that, and I heard kind of what you were saying a little bit before. Look, there are at least 1 million, 2 million illegal immigrants in the country with criminal records who have been stopped by local law enforcement at some point in time for some other crime other than entering the country illegally. So you have a situation in which that's the priority. Now, when you get to a question of birthright citizenship, I expect he's going to sign some executive orders clarifying that citizenship, just like in every other country around the world, is something that if you're born of a citizen, not just, hey, your parents are legally here and you happen to be born here, so therefore you have some right to stay. I'm a Mexican American. My mom waited 12 years in line to come to this country. I fully understand the difficulty, and we need to reform our immigration system. But what you're talking about and worrying about 11 million, people who build their lives, it's a false narrative, honestly.
When we heard the president talking in his inaugural speech about territorial expansion plans, obviously we've already talked on this program to a guest about Greenland, but I just wonder whether maybe a little closer to where you are in the United States, whether you could tell us your thoughts on the Panama Canal and what exactly Donald Trump has got in mind for that canal and why.
Well, look, the country of Panama was essentially founded as an American client state. The canal zone was American soil. John McCain was born in the canal zone, and there was a question of his ability to run for president. He was born in the canal zone. That was American soil. And then Jimmy Carter gave it away back in the 70s. It was a bad deal then. They violated the terms of the treaty, and therefore we can reclaim our property. It's not. I don't think you're talking about, a military. I know there's been a lot on the news about military expansion and using the military to invade other countries. Look, this is a peace president.
Chris, sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you, Chris. Donald Trump is just about to speak. We're going to listen in very quickly to what he's saying.
We blew it, and then I went outside and we were freezing. You would have been very unhappy. The sun was very deceptive, I will tell you. It is cold out. And I'm sort of saying, that was so beautiful today. Maybe they should do it there every 4 years. Does that make sense? I don't know. Because, the outdoor thing is really good, but it gets a little cold around this time of the year, as some people have noticed. And a lot of times they suffer through it. There was no suffering in that room. It was 72 degrees. It was perfect with the best acoustics I think I've ever heard in a room. This is not so bad either. But I just want to say, you're a younger, far more beautiful audience that I just spoke to. And I want to keep it off the record. I want to keep that off the record because I don't want to have all those big shots up there. I don't want to think you're more powerful than them, you look better than them, and I love you. Now, we just had a great time. We just had a great day. This was amazing. When you think we took a journey, I mentioned in the speech, a lot of people said that was not a journey that was possible, and it was indeed possible. I didn't really know too much about what they were saying when they said that, but a lot of people felt it. And we hooked up with J.D. very early. I watched J.D. over a period of time. I endorsed him in Ohio. He was a great senator and very, very smart. The only one smarter than him was his wife. That was, I would have chosen her, but somehow the line of succession didn't work that way, right? But now she's great and he's great. This is a great, beautiful couple and unbelievable career. I just said to him, you are very upwardly mobile, because he hasn't been doing it that long, but he picked it up so quickly. Remember, the first week was a little bit like the fake news was hitting him really hard. And I said, ooh, this may be tough, but after that, it was smooth sailing for him. He took on everybody. He took on the meanest. I don't want to use the word corrupt because we're into a new system, so let's wait till the corruption begins, because it will. But he took on some pretty mean people, and he handled it well. I want to also congratulate Mike Johnson for the job that he's doing. Steve, we gave him a majority of almost nothing, and then I said, to make it tougher on him, let me take 2 or 3 of the people, right? I said, he'll only have to suffer with that for about 3 months. How are they doing, by the way? Are they? Is that moving along?
Totally unified.
I said, do you mind if I take this one, that one, and a couple of others? He didn't mind. He can handle it. No, he's a man that's liked by everybody. I've never met a man like this. You've got how many is it, 219 or 220 or something? 220. And of the 220, 219 really like him. I noticed he got 1 negative vote once about 2 weeks ago. But I think even 220 like him, if you want to know the truth. And that's very unusual. I know a lot of nice guys in Congress, and they have 35 people that hate him. So if you have 35 people that hate you and you only have 1 or 2 or 3 votes, you'll have 5, I think. But that's going to be like, the good news is when we get to that 5 number, it's going to feel like a massive majority. You could be really nasty to a couple of them at least, So it's going to feel like hitting your head on the wall and stopping. It feels so good to stop. But he's done a fantastic job. And Steve Scalise is, he's our hero because, I was with him. You talk about being shot. I was with him. He got some bad ones, and his incredible wife, and she really loves him. You never know about that. I've been with other people. They were doing poorly, and the wife is like looking at her watch. She can't get out of the hospital fast enough. How's he doing? I don't know. He's all right. That woman was a mess. She was crying and crying. No, they're going to take him. They're going to take him. I told Steve when he finally woke up, it was a while too. The doctor told me it was the most blood they've ever transfused in any patient. They've never done anything like it. And here he is, the picture of strength, right? And he's been a great friend of mine. right? With a family, because of a family. And what a job you did. It worked out pretty much better than we even thought, right? And I did have a couple of things, to say that were extremely controversial. And between JD and Melania and anybody else that heard, please, sir, it's such a beautiful unifying speech. Please, sir, don't say these things. I said, I'm telling you, it's going to play great. They say, you're right. For this group of people, it's going to play great. You're the only ones I hurt by not, but we had some beauties, didn't we, Melania? She said, sir, calls me sir when she's angry. No, I'm only kidding. I better say I'm only kidding, or the press is going to pick that one up loud and clear. No, but she said, no, I think it would be terrible. It's such a nice speech. I think it's, it all depends on your delivery. How was the delivery? Was it good? But she said it's such a beautiful speech. You can't put things in there that you were going to put in. And I was going to talk about the J6 hostages, but you'll be happy because, it's action, not words that count. And you're going to see a lot of action on the J6 hostages. See a lot of action. And I was going to talk about the things that Joe did today with the pardons of people that were very, very guilty of very bad crimes, like the Unselect Committee of Political Thugs, where they literally, what they did is they destroyed and deleted all of the information, all of the hearings, practically not a thing left. They deleted all the information on Nancy Pelosi having turned down the offer of 10,000 soldiers. You wouldn't have needed 10,000, you could have had 500, and it would have stopped. Because we may have had 1 million people that day, the people that were there. You don't see any photographs, but we have a lot of great photos. But you don't see those photographs. They don't put them in. They show the people at the Capitol. But I was talking about that. I was going to talk about that. They said, please don't bring that up right now. You can bring it up tomorrow. I said, how about now in front of I'll bring it up right now. This little time delay is good because we're getting great reviews on the speech. Now watch. They'll take the speech and say, I didn't like it because he left there and he talked to people. But we're giving you a little more information than we gave upstairs. But no, they pardoned a lot of people. They pardoned, before we even get to today, they pardoned, 33 murderers, absolute murderers, the worst murderers. When you get the death sentence in the United States, you have to be bad because they don't give it much. And he pardoned almost everybody having a death sentence. And if you went through the crimes that were committed, you wouldn't even believe them, the level of violence, the people that were killed, the innocence of people that were killed and children killed by these people. And he pardoned them for whatever reason. He spared them, but they didn't spare the people that they killed. And who knows what happens in the future. It's one of the worst because a lot of times they let them out early after that. They say you're going to be in for life, but then all of a sudden they get let out for good behavior and then they go on a rampage. It's one of those little things, right? But I was going to talk about that. But I was really going to talk about the level of, what's going on. Why are we doing this? Why are we trying to help a guy like Milley? Why are we doing Milley? He was pardoned. What he said, terrible what he said. Why are we helping some of the people? Why are we helping Liz Cheney? Liz Cheney is a disaster. She's a crying lunatic and crying Adam Kinzinger. He's a super crime.
That was Donald Trump there, speaking again. This time, we just saw him standing there, and he is currently in the Emancipation Hall at the Capitol building. So we were just watching him there. And he also praised Vice President J.D. Vance and the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, Tom.
Absolutely. Emancipation Hall. He's got all the overflow because, of course, the rotunda is pretty small. Only 600 seats in the rotunda there. He's got 1,200. So a bit of the overflow audience there in Emancipation Hall.
And he said they were younger and a far more beautiful audience than the one that he had spoke to in the rotunda. So there we are, Donald Trump still talking. And as Donald Trump prepares to take the reins of the Oval Office, the world does bid farewell to Joe Biden, from promising to end the war in Ukraine to being held responsible for the Gaza ceasefire. Will Trump be able to accomplish things Biden just couldn't do? We can now speak to David Kushner, a former White House director of speech writing to President Bill Clinton. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. First of all, President Biden's time in office has, of course, come to a close. The Trumps and the Bidens had tea today and they travelled together in the Beast. It was really ceremonial, the handover. It was extremely peaceful. How significant was it to see them together? Oh, I'm afraid we're just having a few technical problems there, but we'll definitely get back as soon as we can. That was something that we've just been watching throughout the day. You know, we did say that it seems to be a peaceful transfer of power today, Tom.
A very orderly transition.
Yeah, absolutely. And in those freezing temperatures. Wouldn't it have been interesting to have been a fly on the wall in that tea between the Trumps and the Bidens? I wonder what they said to each other.
We'll probably have to wait until the book comes out, whoever's book comes out first, but certainly an orderly transition. We will. We'll have to do that. An orderly transition indeed. And of course, during the last couple of minutes, we've been listening to Donald Trump speaking in Emancipation Hall, which is still on the Congress site, but speaking to a larger audience than he was able to speak to in the rotunda. Well, during the weekend, the world watched as the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal was enacted. The first 3 Israeli hostages were handed back by Hamas yesterday, and around 90 Palestinian prisoners were released by Israel today. Many have questioned whether it was the work of the Biden administration or the threat of Donald Trump returning to the White House. Well, Trump previously warned there would be, quote, hell to pay if a deal was not reached by the time he took office. Well, we're joined now by David Satterfield. David, until May of last year, you were President Biden's U.S. envoy for humanitarian assistance for Gaza. You're also the U.S. ambassador to Lebanon and Turkey. And I'd just like to sort of pick up on what Donald Trump was saying in his inaugural address and just ask you what stood out for you in terms of what a return for Donald Trump means for his allies.
Well, the administration will face a number of challenges in the Middle East and beyond, but it also will face very significant opportunities. And I think that's the critical theme here. The picture in the Middle East is quite a different one than would have presented even a few short months ago. You have a very diminished Iran. You have Hezbollah, its leadership decapitated, its military strength diminished. That was compelled by circumstances to agree to the ceasefire a short while ago. You have the fall, after 50 plus years, of the brutal kleptocratic Assad regime. All of this provides opportunities for the incoming administration. There is the chance of seeing a different, more stable Middle East emerge. The challenges remain significant, particularly on the issue of Gaza. Gaza's ceasefire first phase has begun, but moving from that first phase to a critical second phase, the release of further all living hostages, and then finally the resolution of the fate of all hostages and the redeployment out of Gaza of Israeli forces, that remains to be negotiated. It's going to be a challenge, but Hamas is constrained, as Hezbollah was, and good diplomacy, forceful diplomacy, has the ability, I believe, to achieve a success here.
I just want to ask you, because you're one of the rare foreign policy experts we can speak to who's worked under both administrations. You were appointed ambassador to Turkey under President Trump, I believe. Do correct me if I'm wrong. You also have worked with the Biden administration. Therefore, you're well positioned to tell us Who deserves the credit for that ceasefire deal? To how much should we give credit to the incoming Trump administration, and how much credit should we give to the outgoing Biden administration?
Well, like most career officers, I've worked with every president, in my case, since Jimmy Carter. But with respect to your question, it was the combined efforts of both the Biden administration and the incoming administration that made the success of these negotiations possible. And it was quite exceptional. It was an example, despite the partisan atmosphere that has at times prevailed, where to achieve a common goal, the release of those hostages, the initiation of the ceasefire and all that that means for the people of Gaza, both administrations, current and incoming, worked together. It was a common achievement. Both deserve credit.
I just want to ask you something, actually, about the release of the hostages. We did see that happen yesterday. 3 hostages were released. When they were released, we saw those pictures of what appeared to be Hamas fighters surrounding the vehicles that were carrying the hostages as they were moved into Israel. Is this something that's really going to concern the US looking forward, and Israel? And what could this potentially mean for the future?
You're quite right to draw attention to those images. The challenge of Gaza is a challenge which the previous administration has made quite clear over the past year plus, that there can be no resolution to the problem of Hamas, this terrorist group and its dark nihilistic vision, through kinetic military means alone. It requires a political framework, a political horizon. And the administration believed, I think correctly, that the only such horizon, not just for the people of Gaza, but for the people of Israel and the region as a whole, is a credible pathway to a negotiated permanent status resolution. Now, that's a tough, tough message to preach to a traumatized Israeli population and to an Israeli coalition government, which finds embrace of that concept very, very hard. But hard truths are truths nevertheless. And the image you saw of those armed Hamas elements just demonstrates what we have known and what the Israeli national security leadership has known all along. Hamas remains a potent force. It must be confronted by more than military means alone.
I just want to ask you, you've already touched on the fact that you believe it was the combined efforts of the Biden and Trump administrations that made the ceasefire deal possible. But one question a lot of people are asking is why it took so long. That deal, which really didn't change all that much from May of last year until January of this year, was on the table all that time. Why wasn't it signed in May of last year? Why did it have to wait until January of this year? What took so long?
Primary reason was Hamas's unwillingness from last May until comparatively recently to re-enter negotiations. If you want to know, if you want to speculate on why Hamas moved, look at the region. There was no cavalry coming to their rescue, no Iran, no Hezbollah. They were all alone. And I think it was that fundamental fact that compelled them to the decision to enter into this first phase.
Okay, well, David Satterfield, President Biden's former U.S. envoy for humanitarian assistance for Gaza. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Thank you.
Okay, we can speak now to Republican strategist Angie Wong, who was inside the Trump inauguration ceremony and is now in the green room at the Capitol. Angie, great to have you with us once again here on Al Arabiya News. And I know you were listening into that speech, you were present. I mean, just tell us, listening to that speech, watching that speech, what was it like at Congress today?
Oh, it was a historical moment for sure. I think you felt a lot of happiness in that room from both sides. I think there was a sign of relief, as well as a new dawn. It is absolutely incredible that we have a new president. He is now officially President Donald J. Trump, and he is going to kick off the very first day of his presidency with promises that he's delivered, and he's going to keep his promises with about 200 executive orders that will be signed momentarily. Number one on his agenda will be closing the borders and declaring that a national emergency on our southern borders.
Yeah, I mean, just listening to Donald Trump, the 47th president, speaking there and promising a new golden age for the United States. I mean, did it sound overall to you like an uplifting sort of a speech?
It was a little bit more of a fight than uplifting. I think I think the man was ready to go into action. He had his fight face on today as he entered the rotunda. He's ready to go. He wants day one to mark beat, to even breathe and enjoy the moment, it seems. He is a little bit more relaxed now in the visitors center of the Capitol, where he's giving a speech to the overflow crowd. Much more relaxed, smiling, joking, going off script. And having a good time finally. I think it's been a very long road for him. We're witnessing one of the major comebacks in American history, certainly in my lifetime. And I think he's going to finally start enjoying himself.
As you said there, a long road for Donald Trump, but he's back, you know, doing what he loves best, entertaining crowds and campaigning, Angie. I wanted to ask you something a little bit about people who were there watching this inauguration speech. The tech tycoons, it looked like Tech Corner was happening there. We had Elon Musk, of course, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos. What does this mean for the next 4 years? And are people reassured that free speech will be coming back to America?
It's pretty incredible who he had on the main stage with him. I mean, you would imagine more family members, more of the people who got him into office and his disciples. But no, instead he had the tech tycoons and their spouses on the stage with him, which is remarkable. It really does mean that he is the new type of Republican, one that understands technology, one that will bring that forward into our country. You know, you talk to a lot of the workers here in the federal government, and they're still back in the 80s with a lot of the equipment that they're using. So it's nice to see a president with a realistic vision of the future, and he knows that he needs the tech titans to get him there. So I think that's something that's truly remarkable. What was also notable was who wasn't there, including our new border czar, Tom Homan. He is busy at work. We heard reports earlier that they're in the office, they're getting ready to do mass deportations, round up a lot of the illegals that have crossed over. Again, that was one of the pillars of the Trump campaign, going in to close the borders, to rescue the children who've entered this country illegally and return them to their families.
Angie, we've heard President Trump along the course of the last couple of months, during the course of the last few months, vowing to remake the federal government. I'm just wondering how nervous you think America's civil servants are with regards to what President Trump and, we should add, Elon Musk have in store for them.
Yes, well, I think a lot of people have cleared out their desks in preparation for the new administration coming in. As soon as a lot of the secretaries are affirmed by the Senate, they're going to get to work right away. And so a lot of federal employees may not be coming back. And again, President Trump demands that people are in their desks at the office 5 days a week. So we'll see how much of that happens, because we know over 80% of federal workers are working from home.
And just lastly, Angie, we've spoken lots of times in the last few months, and I know that you must be really excited about today, because we've been speaking at stages of the campaign, stages of the election process when it wasn't at all clear that Donald Trump was going to win. I just want to know, you've been there in the Capitol today. How are you going to spend the rest of your day?
Oh, I am finally going to embrace today. I think we've been in campaign mode for the last 4 years. We really do need to take on this moment. I know that as of today, my children's future, it's going to be better. And that's how I really feel as a parent here. So I think Americans on both sides should rejoice. This is a new dawn.
All right, Angie Wong, Republican strategist, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us once again on Arabiya News.
Thank you.
Donald Trump is back in the White House today, promising a golden age of America and making the country great again, Tom. But let's catch up with our correspondent right now, Nick Harper, who's been watching the events in Washington. Nick, absolutely freezing cold, but what's the overall feeling about how today's proceedings went?
Well, it certainly looked very different to what it should do. We would normally see crowds of tens of thousands of people outside on the Mall here in the US Capitol watching the new president giving his speech on the steps of the Capitol. Of course, that didn't happen. Donald Trump instead speaking inside the Capitol building with just a couple of hundred people in attendance, but then many of his supporters watching on TVs across the US, but also in a large sports arena less than half a mile from where he was speaking. He will be heading to that sports arena in about 2 hours' time, and the mood there is already jubilant. The people who are watching from inside that arena, about 20,000 of his most ardent supporters, they were often on their feet for standing ovations as Donald Trump outlined what he planned to do during the next 4 years in office. So it definitely looks different. It's quieter out on the streets, many people huddled indoors. But for the Republican supporters of Donald Trump who've made the journey to Washington, D.C., they're still seeing this as a day of celebration.
Yes, indeed. As you mentioned there, an indoor inauguration really meant cutting the size of the audience. How closely watched was it, and how much of a difference did it make for people to actually be indoors? You have saying that the streets are a little bit more quiet right now, but do you think Trump still feels like he's got centre stage? In his inaugural speech, I felt like he was a little bit more muted than we're used to seeing him.
Yeah, definitely more muted. It was interesting because his tone was much calmer, but in many ways it was perhaps more businesslike. You could see this as an incoming president who means business, who wants to hit the ground running, who's laying out the dozens and dozens of executive orders that he intends to sign over the coming hours and coming days. But undoubtedly, Donald Trump, he is known from his differences, his tone and delivery. When he's in a small room, he's often more muted. When he's in front of a large rally, he's bombastic, he's joyful, he's speaking off the cup. And I think the difference between those two speeches that he's just made, as was remarked upon by one of your guests just a moment ago, he gave his inaugural address in a more somber tone to a smaller audience, and then perhaps went next door to Emancipation Hall, also in the US Capitol, the overflow room for the people who weren't able to get into the rotunda to see him in person. And there he's given a very different speech. He's still speaking at the moment, a speech that seems much more off the cuff, less scripted, less prescriptive, and really more about speaking about the things he wants to talk about in a more jovial, excited way, unlike that more muted, perhaps presidential type of speech that we heard in his actual inaugural address.
Yes, indeed. We just saw him joking around and saying that the crowd was much better looking at the speech he's giving. Now, I'm not sure what that says. But historic second term, really, for Donald Trump. Nick, a lot of the first hours of the second Trump presidency. You mentioned the executive orders there. What can we expect? Is it going to be extremely busy? Do you think Trump's going to enjoy himself a little bit more?
I think he means business, and I think he knows this time around, going into it for the second time, he knows how to get things done, and he knows what he wants to get done. In 2017, when he entered the White House, it was just a few months after that shock win, a shock for the country, but also a shock for Donald Trump himself. And at that time, he was relying on established Washingtonians, people who were part of politics and had been for a very long time. This time, he's surrounding himself rather with loyalists, with people that he feels can help him to get things done. And I think that wish wish list of things, including closing the border, cutting government inefficiencies, ramping up domestic oil and gas production. It all very much speaks to a long list of things he wants to get done and wants to get done very quickly. A really marked change from how he entered the White House 8 years ago. This time round, he's making it very clear what he wants to do and just how quickly he wants to get that done.
Nick Harper in Washington, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Great to have you on the show. Now, let's go back to speak to David Kusnet, a former White House director of speech writing to President Bill Clinton. I'm so sorry. We did have you earlier. We had a few technical problems, and I'm so glad that you're back, David. Thank you so much. So President Biden's...
Glad to be back.
Yeah, thank you once again. Let's have a quick chat. So President...
I'm hearing you very faintly.
Oh, only very faintly? Let me know if that's any better for you.
I'm sorry to trouble the audience with this, but can we make it louder?
Yes, of course. Can we please make it louder? I think the tech magicians are going to make it louder for you now. So hopefully you can hear me loud and clear there, David.
I guess some of the tech magicians were at the inauguration today, but
I think they're all at the inauguration, hence why we're having some technical problems. Obviously, Musk and Bezos are
maybe they're
busy.
watching it now and they can help out.
Yeah. Can you hear me now, okay?
Now I can hear you now.
Oh, fabulous stuff. Okay, great to have you. And it seems like the tech magicians did work out there. Let's have a chat about President Biden's time in office. It's obviously come to a close. The Trumps and the Bidens, you know what? We saw them have tea today, and they also traveled together in the Beast to the ceremonial handover. I just want to say today seemed like a peaceful transfer of power. How significant was it to see the Trumps and the Bidens together, and what it means for democracy?
Well, I think sometimes the word normie is used almost as something to be contemptuous of, but in a small d democratic society, normality is good. And I'm sorry. The tech wizards were calling me on my cell phone. I turned the cell phone off.
That's no problem. I'm sure that you're in demand.
Normality is good. And it's normal for the outgoing president and the spouse and the incoming president and the spouse to be having tea or coffee together when there's a peaceful transfer of power taking place. And it's certainly better than what happened 4 years ago when there wasn't when President Trump did not welcome President Biden to the White House, and when there wasn't an entirely peaceful transition of power. So today is better than 4 years ago, and it's more normal, and that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So today is better than 4 years ago, of course. Donald Trump says he wants to be a peacemaker, that he got a standing ovation from that. He also said the golden age of America begins right now. Honestly, what did you make of the speech as a whole coming from Donald Trump? And do you feel optimistic about the next 4 years?
Well, I certainly hope that he will be a peacemaker, and I hope that there will be a golden age rather than what some people are calling a gilded age, which, refers back to the late 19th century when the very wealthy dominated American politics. And I think the difference, traditionally, an inaugural address is the new president speaking to the entire country on behalf of the entire country. And this was not a typical inaugural address. This was, I think, much more of a reprise of the campaign stump speech than it was a typical inaugural address. And it may just be that the norms, to use that word again, the norms in our society and in our politics are changing. But this speech was much more of a continuum with the campaign than turning over a new leaf as a re-inaugurated president.
David Kushner, the former White House director of speech writing to President Bill Clinton. I just want to say, my mum always told me normal was boring, but I think in politics you might be right, and it's definitely not. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so as we draw to a close, good to reflect, isn't it, on the transition of power. As I think everyone's been saying, it's been an orderly transition from the Biden administration, the 46th president, to the 47th president, Donald Trump, who was, of course, as well the 45th president. So a historic day, the first time since the 1800s that a president has served 2 terms non-consecutively. Lots of historic firsts there.
Yeah,
What is the venue?
And the first time since 1985 that it's been held inside due to the bitter cold. Ronald Reagan, he was the last president to be inaugurated inside the rotunda. I must say, Tom, what a day to reflect on. We've heard so much coming from Donald Trump, and I think his speech was a little bit more muted. I really felt that. And the golden age of America begins right now. We're really going to have to see what happens. I always think that the 100 days of a presidency is important. And I hope it's the most crucial bit. So we've heard a lot from Donald Trump, executive orders to be signed today, a lot of change to come in place. But let's reflect on this in 100 days and see exactly what's been achieved.
And before we know it, it'll be the midterms in 2 years, less than 2 years from now. He's got plenty to get done. Well, that's all we've got time for on today's edition of W News.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us on W News. It's been such a pleasure, Tom, to have you working with me. Thank you so much. Great to be on set together, and we'll have more coverage from Washington tomorrow. Good night, everyone, from me and Tom Burges Watson, of course.
Thank you.